to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST. Every day of the week, we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and frankly, any other market where we can try to make some or a lot of money on the internet. I am your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-hosts, two legendary co-hosts today. One, legendary _ Gains, the familiar co-host, is back. He said he was going to stay away. He couldn't stay away at all with very special guest Stats Punk 9059. Great to have you with us. I love it when two people on the same camera, when everyone gets jammed in, it creates some nice like comedic energy. It's good stuff. How you guys doing over there?
What's up, dude? What's up, B-Check? What's up, everybody? It's been a couple months.
Jim.
How you doing, guys?
It's been a couple days for me, but I can't stay away. It's 5 a.m. and I think the comedic element in the morning by sitting together sharing the same screen is good.
It's good stuff.
Just through my gold pudgy that Lucas sent, right between us. So that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, that's a great setting for the people who are just listening in. I'm trying to recount or see if I can recount the NFTs that Sam's got up behind him. He's got one gold penguin. We have a Chromie squiggle. We have a moonbird, a CryptoPunk. The other ones, I'm not.
We got a quirky Orenga, a Doodle, a Moonbird Mythic, and an Azuki. But of those 7 NFTs, I still only own 3 of them. But still a nice vibe up there. Very nice vibe.
Very nice vibe. How are things going, guys? You've been hanging out for a few days, taking the.
It's awesome, man. I the one thing about living out here in the mountains is it's awesome when people visit. I've had a few DGens visit, and a couple people normally come to ski, but having Legendary come out here in the summer has been amazing. So, yeah, it's been great to get to hang.
It's pretty fun, man. Legendary, nice to have you. Nice to have you back. Feels like not too long, but how's your trip been so far?
Pretty good. So I'm way less jet lagged than I thought I'm gonna be. So I'm actually getting up early. I'm actually tired in the morning.
Okay.
But trip's been amazing. It's been amazing to see Sam. Spend a couple of days there, and today we're gonna fly out to San Diego and be out for another 2 weeks before I'm back. But I've been missing the show, despite only missing a couple of episodes. I've been missing it. I've been re-listening in the car or when we're driving.
Good.
Good to be back for this special episode.
What was the I couldn't tell if we were joking or if we were being serious in the chat yesterday. Are there really bears where you are? Are there actually bears? There are real bears.
We have real bears. We have real bears that come into the yard, but unfortunately we haven't had, or fortunately, because it's not great when they come, but there have not been any in the house, yard, garage since we got back or since Legendary got here. But no, there are definitely bears out here for sure.
Interesting. So it's not just fearful of the metaphorical bear.
Most people don't get worried about them when they go for like a 30-minute hike, and Legendary was a little bit worried about them, but if you're loud enough, they tend not to be aggressive.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's pretty fun. I didn't know that you had bears there as well. That's pretty cool. Right. Let's get into the market. As always, we're going to get into all of the normal headlines as well as catch up with these guys who definitely want to hear their thoughts on just where we are in the market and how things are going as well. Huge news, Sam. Particularly want to hear your thoughts on the stuff coming out over the weekend. I know we don't want to necessarily go in the political direction, but like a fairly historic set of news coming out on the weekend. So definitely want to speak about that. But before we do that, as always, just a reminder that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This market is incredibly risky, and we unfortunately do not know anything for sure. So please proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. I'm going to share the screen for the people who are watching in. We're live on X video, live on YouTube too. Let's get into some price action first. Actually, we'll start with the price action. We've got Bitcoin down almost 5%, actually, almost just over 66K. This was probably because the US government started moving some Bitcoin, and then everyone got super scared that they're going to, market sell it all or something. So that sold off almost 5%, back down to 66.5. ETH is just down 1%, so 3.3K. Actually, the strongest out of the majors in the last 24 hours for whatever reason. Solana down 5%, back to $180. In terms of the headlines, we've got the US government sending $2 billion of Bitcoin into 2 wallets, sending Bitcoin down almost 5% to 66K. On the Solana side, Pump.Fund flips ETH in revenue again, Jito also flips Lido, which is Solana's staking equivalent, and the Solana chain is doing more volume than ETH as well. So pretty interesting to see that. We're going to talk a little bit about Solana versus ETH, how we see that progressing. And then finally, SEC amends complaint against Binance that Sol is a security. This has been viewed by the market as kind of a step back in terms of the SEC's kind of attack against crypto. We'll touch on some of those details if we have time a little bit later. A couple of notable sales. CryptoPunks then for 33 ETH, but as we mentioned, CryptoPunks have still been kind of sliding recently, back down beneath 25 ETH, I believe, or in that region. And a couple of nice squiggle sales in the last 24 hours for around 4 ETH as well. But that is the headlines. That's the price action. Legendary. Is there anything catching your attention? I know on the heat map from our NFT marketplace partner Mintify, got Doodles up 10% on that news. I thought that was pretty interesting from my perspective. Mockaverse has bounced 3 to 4%. Everything else seems to be fairly reasonable. I mentioned yesterday that the NFT market in general was like just a touch down as everything was getting, as crypto itself was getting a bit more heated. But I thought it was kind of cool that Doodles just had like a big jump on the news that they were releasing this Doodles record stuff with a pretty prominent group of people. I know 10% is not like a huge crazy amount necessarily, but for a long period of time, good news would come out and just they would have no effect on the market at all. So I thought that was interesting to see. What have you been thinking about? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, especially on a day where I would say the NFT majors are either down, Azuki's at a 3.7 ETH floor, or Bored Apes at 8.95 or flat. I do think that this 10% move up is actually pretty impressive, pretty significant. Maybe another collection that I would point out is one that we've been talking quite frequently on the show. It's the Pirate Nation, the Founders Pirates. They are down 8.3% to a 1.25 ETH floor. They've kind of become like the go-to gaming floor price asset for me to look at. I remember last week when I was on the show, we were speaking about them. We were like very impressed with them, how they managed to stay so close to all-time high at around 1.5-ish ETH. But now they've corrected down a bit, but actually not too much. I think that the 1.25 ETH floor is like still pretty solid for them.
Yeah, pretty good. Very, very impressive from their perspective. And remember, they're the team that have already done their airdrop, right? They did a significant airdrop to their holders. So very impressive that the NFT kind of maintained that kind of price action. Sam, what have you been looking at in the NFT world before we get into the headlines and all that stuff? Like, what's been catching your attention at the moment, whether it's NFT side or just more generally in this market?
I mean, look. I mean, obviously, I think the overall market is a little bit more interesting than the NFT market right now. Just what's kind of going on with crypto majors and obviously the politics angle. There's just a whole lot of new narrative there. I haven't been paying as much attention to meme coins as I think the overall market has. But yeah, on the NFT side, you know, when I'm not checking stuff day to day and I hear that Doodles are up 10%, then I look at the price, it's at like 1.8, 1.9. I'm like, oh, like for someone who's not looking at it day to day, that feels just kind of like par for the course for where Doodles are. And I think a lot of times these moves happen and it's just kind of, bid-ask spread times a little bit, and it's not that big of a deal, but I agree, it is nice to see that there is a positive response to what they're up to there. I mean, the other thing that is hard not to notice is that Milady is just kind of love it or hate it. Milady is the one project that I feel like just the floor price is just staying consistently high relative to where it's been. You have it well above half the floor price of Bored Apes. So that's an interesting one to watch. I know that they have a token of sorts. Has that dropped yet? The token,
the call token?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No. I know the pre-sale for that was like heavily sold out very quickly, and I think it was $20 million they raised. But so maybe you have a little bit of that kind of being anticipated in that price. But just as someone who hasn't been looking at floors on a day-to-day basis, when I look at that screen, I'm like, damn, there's some resilience there to that Milady's price. But again, I think if there is a potential drop coming soon, that would also, along with the fact that it is the project that I think has the most cultural resonance with a group of people in this space, and all you need is 5,000 people who love your project for it to do well. So it's hard to, that is the one thing that jumps out at me when I look at that kind of like price screen.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. We've been speaking about Miladies as well, how they very routinely will just kind of behave in opposition to the rest of the market. If the rest of the market's down, Malays will be up. If the rest of the market's up, Malays will be down. They kind of do their own thing, and they keep legging up and then just being able to hold where they are. A lot of leverage in that collection, though. I checked the kind of loans on it, and I think I might have a couple of loans out for them. Like a lot of leverage, like across the board in Malays versus other ones, like more so than other ones. You know how normally the chart goes like that, where the higher the amount of capital out on loan, the higher the interest. It's just like high interest everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
and it could be, I mean, it could be related to potential drop coming in, you know, who knows? Yeah. I was excited because, you know, I haven't really been on these shows for 2 months because I've been kind of doing some other stuff, but I was very excited to get to 1,000 loans on Blend without a single default. And I was at like 984. And then, then I had 3 pudgy defaults in one day, and I was like, "Fuck!" Like my 1,000 tweets with no defaults. It's not going to happen. But the good news was I got a bunch of pudgies at 8.2 ETH, so it ended up being good for my money, but bad for my for the tweet I was really pumped to put out.
Nice. And then this is the thing, right? So in the end, for the people who don't quite understand what's going on there, like with the loans, it's not necessarily like a traditional loan where I remember I was speaking to a traditional finance person. They were like, "Oh, so when do you get paid? Like, when does the money come? Like every month, every whatever?" It's like, no, you don't understand. Like, you only get paid when you close the loan. So, therefore, it means that you have to be patient, and in order for you to be profitable, you need to actually close the loan, either by them paying you back or you deciding you want to close it. But it also means that in a terrible scenario, you can go 980 loans or however many, and like all of the gains could potentially disappear, right? If you have a really terrible day. But in this instance, you said, Pudgy's ended up, it kind of like rocketed up out of that decline. So kind of worked out well. But what was your experience then kind of going through that, and what were you thinking at the time? Because that must have been a bit dicey.
I remember it was actually when I was in London, and it's never... I remember because I was out to dinner with my wife and 2 friends, and there was something happened where maybe it broke through the Bendow floor or something like that. And because the format is you have to wait 24 hours after you close a loan, I was like, "Fuck, guys, I gotta go home," because it's a race against the clock, and every hour is like 100 more that are going to get sold before you if you don't act. So I was a little bit like, as you said, you pick up peanuts in front of a steamroller sometimes, like earning 0.01 ETH per week or whatever, and the next thing you know, you're down 0.8 ETH. So I was lucky that I had patience when I got stuffed with those, and and I ended up not losing it. It ended up being a net win, but it was being not glued to the screen and kind of in London probably helped, because I wasn't paying as close attention once I did get it. And that probably is the main reason I held it for a little longer, and suddenly it was double digits. So that was
nice. So yeah, interesting insight there. Probably people don't necessarily see that side of things as much. Definitely
because we've been talking about like Pendle. We've been talking about, Chris and I, or Legendary and I have been talking about Pendle. We've been talking about, looking at Wasabi Juice and the ETH yields you're getting. It's, you can still get, if you're patient and you get the right loans, you can still get, like, I have a 10% on ETH loan out on a 2 ETH pudgy loan, so you can get, like, Blend still has decent yields if you're patient. It's weird though, because ever since blur farming kind of slowed down so much, the lending market's weirdly gotten more competitive, which is not what I like. Back in the day, you used to be able to get like crazy loans sometimes as a lender, and now it feels like it's a little bit tighter, and I haven't quite figured out why that. I think it could be that a lot of the borrowers have left, because so many of the borrowers used to be people who were like farming airdrop and trying to get levered up as much as possible. But I don't know, I should, that's an easy query to run. I should do that.
Yeah, I've been watching that quite close as well. I'm always keeping an eye out. I've experienced the same thing that you just described. It's harder to get the crazy good deal, but as you say, if you're either patient and also just not greedy, so like sometimes these things will approach 9% and you're like, oh, will it get to 14? That would be great. Will it get to 15%? And it's just not getting there at the moment. So you could easily take your 8-9% on ETH, which is way more than what you'll get either staking ETH or lending ETH. I think you can lend ETH on Aave for like 2 or 3% maximum.
Yeah,
so
it's hard to get. I mean, it's not, you can figure it out, but yeah, you can get double digits on very low risk stuff. And I recognize the irony in saying that after I just talked about how I got stuffed with 3 puppy loans a month ago, but that's a little bit more aggressive than my normal lending.
Yeah, I like it. Very interesting discussion there. We definitely want to get your guys' opinions and reflections and reactions to the weekend stuff. Legendary, maybe first. Did you follow the Bitcoin conference stuff out there anymore? What's the sentiment been like? What was your reactions to all the news? We went through all the rundown yesterday, so we don't need to go through the specific things. But what stood out to you, and what were your reactions to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, obviously the crowd was very, very pleased with Trump's speech at the conference, right? But if you kind of abstract away from all those emotions and look at what's actually happening, and you referenced that Bitcoin strategic reserve, the United States has been holding their Bitcoin for quite a while. I mean, I know there's been a movement now that we're going to talk about a bit later, because that's the main headline in the show. But they've been holding the BTC for quite a while. So having that strategic reserve is essentially saying that Trump would continue to do what the US government has been doing for quite a while. So given that it's not an announcement that he's going to market buy a shit ton of BTC, but it's just continuing an existing strategy or keeping an existing status up, I was actually quite surprised to how the price reacted very positively to that. Would have not expected that on, again, very, just from the delivery of the speech and going for that bit, firing Gary Gensler on day one, repeating that, crowd was played very well. But if you look through all of that noise, if you cut that out, essentially there's not been an announcement that would have been like, oh wow, BTC needs to pump to 70K because this is so giga bullish.
I think for me, the thing that was, I mean, obviously having, a candidate who is clearly leading in, on the betting markets for the person to be the next president, to have someone like that talk this, to get a candidate's time when there's only 90 days or 100 days to the election, and for a full day to be, or not a full day because he spoke in Minnesota later that day, but for a day to be given to a Bitcoin conference is, I think for people who've been in the space for any bit of time, that is clearly bullish, and it clearly is, you just can't get away from that. I don't even know what a Bitcoin strategic reserve really means. Like, is this another way of saying, like, we will continue to hodl like we've been doing ever since we got this stuff? Ever since Silk Road, we're just going to keep hodling, like doing no different from whatever.
And anything else we confiscate, we'll hold that as well.
We'll hold that as well, which seems, given the fact they have 230,000 Bitcoin, like that seems to be the strategy that they've gone with. But it does speak to how much this is a game of communications, a game of sentiment, and that terminology. If I don't know what it means, and I'm someone who spends a fair bit of time, like, it sounds grandiose. So I think it is reasonable that other people would also find it grandiose. I think obviously, Gary Gensler has been a menace to society, for everyone in this space. So the fact that, he came out with that, I think is something people are excited about, and reasonably so. And then, as we said, this idea of I think it may be more just the government formalizing its relationship with the asset by calling it a strategic reserve or whatever it is. And to be fair, there's probably more to it that I'm missing. But it almost feels like it's more about the language that was put around it as opposed to like the actual action. And then having Senator Loomis come on and say she wants to buy 5% of all supply, like at the same time. Now that's just one senator, and it's clearly was not the strategy that I think Trump felt comfortable putting out there. But Tyler talks about this. One of the very interesting things that's going on is I think he's played this idea, crypto. There are one issue crypto voters, right? There are one issue voters who are just all about crypto. And he kind of played it. He played it incredibly interestingly. They didn't mention crypto once at the RNC. You had 4 days of it, and like crypto was just not a topic on the agenda. It was not part of the strategy. But then we got that one day where we can go talk to one issue voters and tell them we're all in and get those votes. But it's not like part of like which I think is a good way, because most voters don't care a ton about Bitcoin. And I think the people who don't like it kind of don't really care either. Like no one's like a one issue negative. No one's like, I'm only going to vote for you if you don't like crypto. Like there are no one issue voters on the other side, but there are a lot of one issue voters on the side of wanting to of liking it. So I think he kind of played it pretty well, of not really mentioning it ever in kind of his stump in his normal conversations, but then having this one day that he kind of came out and committed to the community that it was something that it was all about.
Yeah, I like it. And I definitely take your point on kind of the importance of the language and stopping short of committing to buy. Like there's a big difference between saying we're going to be buying this and adding to a strategic reserve versus we are not selling and we're just going to hold. And I think that allowed people to kind of fill in the gaps and read between the lines and kind of say, well, this is the establishment of one. I don't even think he said, I know the other people maybe spoke about, there being the strategic reserve. I think the word he used was stockpile. He was like, you know, we're gonna add it to the stockpile or something, or create a stockpile.
Yeah, and at that point, it's just literally like, you know, it's just words, because this is exactly the strategy that the Biden administration has had till now. I don't think they've sold. It's the same as, you know.
Yeah, maybe just without telling the story around it. It's like, look, we're not selling, but
I mean, no one's. If a lot of this was seized at Silk Road, you know, that's 3 different presidential administrations that have had this strategy of just holding it, you know, so it's kind of, that feels like a continuation of status quo. But when you throw it in that more official language, a lot of it is, I think it leaves people being like, what is that? Is that big? Like definitely like validating. And I think that validation and saying that we are part of this as opposed to against it, even though it's not necessarily implying any action in particular. But you know, language is everything. So, and clearly, you know, clearly he's working with people who are saying the right stuff.
Yeah, there were a few times where I think even he was surprised at how well the people had prepared him. Like if you saw the Gary Gensler line out live, he had to say it again because he was like completely taken aback by how much everyone absolutely loved him saying that he was going to fire Gary.
Yeah, he's a showman, and he's quite funny. And I think, you know, I think that's something that people who like him and people who dislike him all agree on, is that he is a funny dude. And I think that you saw a little bit of that.
Sure. Just before we move on from this, I think, you know, the broader political landscape is relevant to the extent that I guess people are trying to price in whether, you know, it seems to be consensus that a Trump win is very bullish for Bitcoin and everything else, given his latest contributions. But also now that it's not Biden, obviously Kamala seems to be doing better than many in crypto would like her to be doing. Legendary, I know you're following like the prediction markets a lot and trying to keep on top of those types of things. How are you seeing the markets react? I've seen some stuff about how the polling data is different to the poly market data. And the thing that I'm really interested to see when this all kind of blows over, the argument always is that you follow the money, right? You know, media, you can't trust the media, or at least that's what people want to say. You can't trust the media, you can't trust the polls, follow the money, on-chain stuff. I don't know if that's always going to be the case, but like, just what's your thought as you're monitoring the changes in polling data versus betting activity on the presidential election?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, I think Tyler had a great post on that, kind of comparing the data on Polymarket and on Predicted. If you currently look at Polymarket, at the presidential election winner 2024 bet, Donald Trump sitting at 59%, Kamala sitting at 39%. And that is a Trump bias that you have on Polymarket that doesn't reflect on platforms like Predicted. But to me, the interesting thing is, even if you have that bias on Polymarket towards the crypto community, the odds have been changing like pretty fast. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a bet. It's a $440 million bet. So it would be unwise to assume that this bias is gonna sustain that forever, because it's just too much money on the line for people to be like, nah, I'm just gonna stay within basically my bubble and within the odds in my bubble. And I do think that as we get closer to the election, I could see that bias go away, and those predicted numbers, the polling data and Polymarket just converge together.
So, is the conclusion that you're starting to form that people are betting with their maybe allegiances rather than maybe a broader thing, and you expect that to maybe narrow out if that's what the broader uh, consensus is?
Yeah, I think probably if the bet is smaller, you probably will see more betting with the allegiances or what you like personally believe in,
Sure.
what you like just find funny to bet, or if you just say, I don't know, you see a bet that has like one scenario that you consider to be massively underpriced, you might be taking a gamble and bet on that. But I think as as more volume, as more money is flowing into that bet, that just will play a smaller and smaller role, and it's gonna be more reflective of the polling data and of the other platforms.
I just looked at Predictit and I had no idea because I was looking at a bunch of different sports gambling websites, and Trump seemed to have a very similar lead across the board with Polymark, but it looks like on Predictit right now, Kamala is actually 53 cents to become president. So that is surprising. But I don't think that money has bias. I like, this is not this is a $100 million market, $200 million market. Like, this is not a market where you go to it's a very expensive place to have bias. One thing I would say is if the polls were 59-41, that would be a 100% chance someone's going to win. That's plus 18. But 59-41 actually in a betting market is actually pretty damn close. And I think that sometimes we conflate the two. We think, 59-40, that's huge, because in a poll, that would mean you're up 18%, 18 percentage points for voters. Like, that is an insurmountable lead. Even being up 7 points, if you like, is an insurmountable lead in most states. But this is a betting market where 59-41 is actually, or whatever it is closer than people think. My other view is I don't think this is like bias money. But one thing I have noticed following commentators across the political spectrum and following comments and kind of seeing how people respond to different political posts is that our information is so siloed. If you are someone who is out there liking kind of anti-Kamala, pro-Trump stuff, you are going to get content that makes you think that everyone hates Kamala and that Trump has a landslide win. And that's why every single one of these comments where they show like Kamala's likability going up, people are saying this is lying, this is biased, this is fake. But then if you go follow the Kamala people, and if you go follow like the Democrats on Twitter, like, it is the most energy I've ever seen out of that side ever. And people really are obsessed with this candidate, and the donation numbers say it. And people are like, how could they like? But they do. It is a very real, tangible energy on that side as well. And I think that what could be happening on Polymarket is just that the market participants that dominate that market are really in one of these more on the right-leaning silo, where people legitimately think that she has no chance because they're surrounded by information of people who actually think she's terrible. And I think that our information silos are so segregated right now, where you're so much in these silos that your view of the reality of the world can get really distorted as a result of that.
So
the way I approach it is I have two lists. One list of right-leaning, with Jason Miller and all, the most right-leaning folks out there, and then a few of some of the left-leaning. You throw in like the Cranstons, whatever the names are, like those guys. And it's very interesting just to see how the feeling on both is so different. So that's one of the things I've been noticing. And so for me, the bets I've been making on Polymarket, like, I went hard. I'm still going hard against like this Michelle Obama. I saw this kind of, it's one of those things that you'll see like Vivek Ramaswamy mention, or even Elon mention, and then if you're on the left side, like, it's not even a possibility. Like, yeah. I have a friend who worked about, and when I said like people are betting 5-7% that Michelle Obama is going to be a Democrat nominee, even after Biden endorsed Kamala, and like these guys were like, put all your money in it. Like, the people who are actually paying attention on that side. So you get opportunities, I think, by following both sides separately and really trying to absorb the information on both sides, which is how I've kind of approached Polymarket.
That's fascinating. I guess one of the logical conclusions of that then is, and maybe this is what you're suggesting when you mentioned this other prediction market, is that the markets then can really offer completely different odds, just completely dependent on the user base and the information they're getting fed.
My gut instinct, and I'm very surprised Kamala's is at 53 cents on predict, because my gut instinct always was this is just too much money for that kind of arbitrage to be out there. But the fact that she's at 53% on one and 39% on another, that is surprising to me. You know, and like I said, I think to me that the money's kind of in some of the smaller stuff where there's like, Chris and I were talking about this. Like, you should go on to Reddit/conspiracies, figure out what they're arguing is going to happen, and then see if you can build a prediction market to bet against it if you have, you know, good enough information that is kind of silly like that. That's the kind of stuff I'd love to do, to try to find like 4% bets that you can make every 2 to 3 weeks.
It adds up. Like if you do 10 of those and you have the compounding interest and you do 4% every time, you're up to 48%, and you won't get 48% APY on any other thing, whether you go to Pendlify, Wasabi. It would be.
You just got to be sure that they're wrong, because if you get toasted on one of those, it's like a loan gone bust.
And you need to read the terms. You actually need to be aware of how the bet resolves it. I think that's something we've been speaking on the show, that segment of the rules is always hidden under a show more banner, but you need to be sure that you understand what stuff means. I think
precisely, it becomes like a legal document, and this is why the drafting of the statement, which you are saying is either true or false, like every single word you need to read entirely properly. If it needs to be defined properly, you need to define it, because all of these things would just need like crystal clarity, so those things don't get argued with after.
I've seen, for example, the bets on will Biden resign before end of July, end of August, end of September, etc. And I've seen people talking about that. If he gets like very, very sick and he would have to drop out because of that, or even if in the worst case he would die. And people are saying, yeah, I'm betting on this because I think he's like really, really sick, because there's been also like rumors and conspiracy theories around that. Yeah. But if you actually read the rules, the market will only resolve to yes if he himself is announcing that he resigns or has resigned. And if any other thing happens to him, it would resolve as a no, and you will make the money.
Do you know what though? Like, I can see even the way that you've just explained how that was drafted with the lawyer brain in me. Like, I would be able, I'm sure you'd be able to have some kind of argument that the way that he stepped down, you could probably argue that he didn't even do that initial one because it was from an X account. It's like, okay, but is that him necessarily doing it? Did he write it? Did he have this? As in, I'm not saying that it was done by someone else in like suspicious circumstances. What I'm saying is there would be a case to argue that unless, what does it even mean to do the resignation now? Like, obviously he doesn't run the account on a day-to-day basis, right? So someone can tweet something and then you can argue, that wasn't him.
Corporations have been reporting their earnings on Twitter for a long time. I think that would be a pretty widely accepted consensus outside of a few angry people, or a few people who would be, if you do it from your official account and then never step up and disagree with it. The thing that I was thinking more there is like, I'm not betting on Biden's health. That's not a bet I'm going to take. I'm not betting on any 82-year-old's health. I'm definitely not betting on his health. But yeah, I was thinking like, what happens if something, if he's like on his deathbed, and and I don't want to make light of this, but like, if you're like I resigned from president, like as his last words, like the argument that would happen about like how, like what actually happened, like I don't know. Though it feels like there are some of these ones where it's like, and I don't want to make any light of anybody,
no, of course,
anybody's health situation, but he's a feeble dude. He's 82. Crazier things have happened. But yeah, some of the technicalities of some of these bets are ones I personally just want to stay away from.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Interesting discussion on both the political angle stuff, the Bitcoin conference, and these prediction markets, which I think are going to continue to be incredibly interesting and important as we move into election season. Let's get to some of the headlines, though. I don't know if we'll try to make sure we touch on all of them as always, and maybe just get a few thoughts before we just kind of chop it up on the rest of the market as well, because keen to get your thoughts on this since we don't have you every day at the moment. The US government, as we mentioned at the top of the show, split $2 billion Bitcoin into 2 addresses. So this was moved around. I probably wouldn't have even put this as a headline if the price action didn't like nuke 4 or 5% straight after. It just seems that they're moving stuff around. Legendary, do you have a take on this? Is this just people going overboard? General thoughts on price action at the moment?
I think because the market was so very nervous when we've seen Germany selling the BTC, and when we've seen Germany starting to move a couple thousand BTC around, the BTC price would drop 2 to 3%. And just because that event was so very recent, just a couple of weeks ago, the market remembers it very well. And now, obviously, the US has way more Bitcoin than Germany had. And just seeing that initial movement of a 10K BTC, even before it was clear, or before we had the update from Arkham that it looks like it's a institutional custody service and on the exchange that the money is being sent to, the market has reacted in a very similar fashion how it reacted to Germany, with the additional factor that, again, US has more BTC than Germany had. So the dump that we've seen has been a touch larger than with Germany a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. Sam, what are your thoughts here?
I'm not really sure what to think about it. Like it seems like it does seem like weird timing, and I didn't study kind of the wallet and their movement. I think like I think there also is a bit of separation here between the people making these decisions and like the president himself. But from a political standpoint, again, since you are dealing with one issue voters on the crypto side, like it seems like a very weird group to be antagonistic towards if there are political motivations. And again, I actually think there is a little bit more separation than most people do from kind of people who call these shots versus just like, yeah, I actually have a friend who one of my wife's best friends from law school works for the SEC, and she's like, you'd be shocked at how little like Gary Gensler talks to anybody in the executive branch. Like, and he takes a lot of pride in kind of doing his own thing and not being connected to the government himself. That's kind of like a pride point for him, or what he thinks should be the case with these things. It's not like he's getting orders from anyone, nor does he like do one-on-one calls with people there. So that was kind of an interesting point from someone who I do trust and who I've known for a long time, and who's quite close to what happens there. But still, like I said, if this was an antagonistic move, which it may have been towards kind of the things that Trump said, that'd be very, very dumb in my view, because you're pissing off one issue voters and you're winning over no one. But we've seen a lot of dumb stuff. So who knows?
Fair enough. I think that's pretty fair. Market obviously got spooked a little bit. Legendary, I saw a tweet that you put out, just like, no matter how bullish things get, people will get so spooked so quickly.
Yeah, it's a lot of Bitcoin to move though, and without explanation, it's this market's that's a lot for the market to absorb. So I don't. I retweeted that and I agree about it, but there are some question marks for sure.
Yeah, I've kind of played this forward in the future. You know how people kind of talk about how transparency is such a brilliant thing and how it's really good. Can you imagine in the future when like all people's treasuries are on chain and this stuff moves around, and crypto Twitter, whatever is left of crypto Twitter at that point in time, institutional crypto Twitter, and you just keep getting all these notifications of like, Norway's moved their funds here, they're going to go here. Oh no, but what is Honduras doing? What is El Salvador doing? China's now moved their funds. Can you imagine? It'll be like absolutely crazy.
Yeah, but look, if you get a government dynamic where government's like, damn, we like having some Bitcoin, it's kind of like, I actually just don't know enough about how governments have approached gold historically, but like where they, if there is a thing where government's like, we should have some of this because this is kind of becoming increasingly important in the world economy, like, yeah, that is a bullish world. I don't know what money they spend to buy it, but yeah, I think like that there are certainly like kind of more up the middle potential outcomes that are developing here, in my view, that like are extremely bullish.
I like it. Legendary, did you have one more thing to come in on there? Otherwise, I'll move on.
No, very happy to move on.
Cool. Right, we've got a couple. I think one main headline to get to in a minute, but just based on timing, let's hit the Web3 roundup from the snapshot to get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space in the last 24 hours, and then we'll hit the final headline, showing it on the screen for the people who are watching in live on X, live on YouTube as well. Number one, BlackRock CIO of ETFs says that there is no demand for other crypto ETFs at the moment. This clip was published yesterday. I think it came from Bloomberg initially, kind of putting to bed any ideas that there could be a Sol one anytime soon. I think that was that. Next, Swell announces a snapshot and details that the Swell TGE will represent 8% of the supply. No specific date was given, but I know a bunch of people, including myself, was restaking a little bit over there. So that should be interesting to watch. Horizon Labs announces a partnership with Wrecked Brands by Ovi, who was on the show just the other day talking about what they're up to with Wrecked Drinks. Crypto reported to have the #1 super PAC in the US with over 200 million raised by Fairshake. This was a tweet came out yesterday saying Crypto now has the #1 super PAC in the US with over $200 million raised. Fairshake now surpasses both the biggest Republican and Democratic super PACs. I think this is all to do with donors. That was interesting to see. Getting into a couple of other bits of news, Doodles announces Doodle Records and its first project with Pharrell, Sway Lee, and Lil Yachty, and more. Very, very cool. As you said, the price was up 10% on that news, which is rare for NFT collections these days, but good for them. And finally, FWOG. We spoke yesterday how we're going to be covering meme coins a little bit more. FWOG runs to $20 million, up 31,000% in 24 hours. What was the story here? There was the team got an artist to make a bunch of art. The team rugged the artist and the coin. I believe that coin was called Flog. That one was dumped on the community. The proper community, the new community launched FWOG, and the artist gives the community all of the art. So, business as usual in the meme coin trenches. We're going to be covering it a little bit more because, as we discussed yesterday, liquidity is in the meme coins, and therefore some more of our attention is going to get allocated in that direction. Legendary, that is the roundup. We have, I think, the final headline for today, which is interesting me most, so definitely want to get your views on, is this tweet that Bread put out yesterday, where Solana locked in the triple crown of 24-hour fees yesterday. So what happened was Jito, which is Solana's staking equivalent, flipped Lido in terms of fees generated. You had Radium flipping Uniswap, which is Solana's DEX, flipping Ethereum's DEX in terms of fees generated. And Solana, of course, was above ETH as well. We've spoken about this at different times across the show, but wanted to check in with you guys, maybe Legendary first, just like, what's your thinking here, Solana versus ETH, and the fact that, it's really catching all the attention and liquidity at the moment on Solana?
Yeah, and even if you look at Tyler, who posted just 20 minutes ago on how that looks today, you still have Pump on top, and you have actually Trojan coming in at #3, Trojan being that Telegram bot that is used to trade on Solana, used to trade meme coins. So not only have you that dominance of Solana, but you also have like a very, very heavy focus on meme coins with now both Trojan and Pump generating a significant revenue. And I think that kind of perfectly connects to what you guys spoke about on the show yesterday and the clip that went out, that there is so much liquidity in meme coins and that there is so much attention there, and it's not looking like any of that is going away. It's quite the opposite. I think that political season, the pre-election run that we're seeing, is adding even more fuel to that fire and even more speculation to that. So for that reason, I think is just a quick reflection on the show. It's good that like more attention is flowing into that because it's just too much to ignore. And B, it kind of makes me wonder about one thing that we also spoke about on the show when we had Brad on. If you look at some of the comparables in terms of the Radium token versus Uniswap, etc., if there is a mispricing going on, and there seems to be quite a few people on the timeline who say that some of those DeFi tokens on Solana are like massively underpriced and are betting on buying those because there's so much volume and fees and revenue being generated there as opposed to the ETH equivalents. So there's definitely something going on there. Am I a buyer myself of those tokens? I am not so sure, to be honest, because I just don't know how sustainable that move is going to be over the next, like, say, 1 to 2 years, and what the alternative is what the opportunity cost is of just market buying a shit ton of Radium, for example. I think that there's like a bullish base case for that, but I just know that I don't have too much attention in that ecosystem for me to be worth it to put like a significant amount of money into that, and just buying like a couple K worth of the token is, like, for me, not really worth it.
Very fair points. I just wanted to share the Jupiter price action from the last month with you. You're not the only well, maybe we're late to that thought potentially, but just for the people who are listening in and can't see the graph I'm sharing, Jupiter went from about 70 to 80 cents up to as high as 120 maybe a few days ago, now down at 1.08 dollars. So fairly strong performance. One of the tokens that's obviously dropped and gone up, like appreciated in value over time, versus all the other drops which have typically been down only. So yeah, Sam, what are you thinking here on the kind of Solana versus ETH conversation? Are these Solana protocols undervalued versus the ETH ones, given that they're matching them, if not bettering them, in terms of activity?
I mean, there's no question that the activity, the action right now is on Solana, like meme coins in particular. It's just like the hottest theme of the day right now, or I should say of the season. Like this is not, it's no longer a day trend. This has been the trend for 3 to 6 months. So this is like, that is very, very real. How does that translate to a token price? I think you have this, I think we kind of need Brett on the show for that. Like, I feel like Brett's like one of the few people in the space who's really trying to dig into how should we compare activity versus price. And my guess is that there's a lot less correlation than we would think. I think the fact that, ETH has the ETF flows coming now, like I think if you actually look at the way the Bitcoin ETF flows played out, like it's just very different factors that drive a token's price. But it's hard to argue with the idea of ETH's relevance within our ecosystem declining. It's like the activity is moving to within ETH, the activity is moving to L2s, just very different from the world we used to have, where you to buy a JPEG you had to pay $80 out the gate just for the gas fees. Like, we're just in a very different environment. I think there's a lot more attention on Solana, on Telegram, on various, just the whole dialogue and ETH's place within it right now, is just non-negotiably less relevant than it was a year ago, and certainly 2-3 years ago. That's happening. And then the question is just how much does that matter for price relative to other things like institutional flows and things, and I guess that would be the one big factor to me. Like, the ETF is really the one big offset, because I do think, let's just say what we're saying about Bitcoin is true, if and you get a lot more people running to buy it. Well, the first thing that happens when something goes up a lot is people say, I don't want to buy that. What else can I buy? And the rising tide lifts all ships. And for most institutional money, for most retail money, because even for my dad, like, my dad would never buy Bitcoin, but he would buy IBIT, and I think that if ETH becomes easily accessible like that, I think it's well positioned right now. But I also think a lot of us are like 80% ETH, 70% ETH. And if we were constructing a portfolio from scratch right now, there's no way we'd be going 80% ETH. It's just the wrong allocation for the relevance in our current lives, but I think a lot of people are just kind of in that bag because, if you're like me, you're just kind of slow to bridge stuff and change it up and whatever, so I don't know. I just said a whole lot without having a real punchline, but it's another day in the life of stats.
Just to that point though, Sam, like, one of the things I'm finding fascinating is, so say that position, which I think is a legitimate position to have, but it feels like that position, which is maybe people are 70-30 ETH is the most held asset already, like loads of people already own it. Who's going to be the marginal buyer? Everyone already has it. I've seen people, fairly respectable people as well, completely have the entire opposite position now, because for the people who are in Sol and for the people who have been there maybe more, or for people who are like observing all this activity on Sol, well, they're like, well, how can that actually necessarily be the case? Because all of this activity is happening on Sol. So many people have maybe switched over. And so, like, I see with equal weight, people arguing Sol is overbought now. Everyone's moved over to Sol. That's the thing that everyone has. No one has enough ETH, but also the complete opposite, which was your position. So I'm kind of in the middle, where it's like, I'm maybe in the similar position to you, as like I'm more on the ETH side because of historical activity and behavior. But I'm not actually entirely certain. I think that where I came out with, I'm going to be clear on it. I think where I came out on this when I'm trying to think it through is that people have moved more to Sol, and maybe ETH is under owned now. I don't know the exact thing, but that's just like my instinct based on these two warring factions.
I just don't feel like ETH has any relevance momentum. I just don't feel like I don't know if it matters, but like I said, if I if you were constructing your portfolio right now, would you be like, in this moment, I want to be 70% ETH, 15% Bitcoin, 10% Solana, and 5%, no one would be saying that right now. But a lot of people have that position. But again, I think it's the institutional flows that are like the incremental buyer. There is an incremental buyer for ETH for sure. It's just not anybody who's on our spaces right now. And the other thing you have to mention is that Clemente just dumped all his ETH. So there's got to be some lesson in there, and I haven't run the numbers there to figure out what that lesson is, but who would we be to not mention it?
Yeah, we've got to check the stats there. We've got to check the stats and see how that plays out.
He's my influencer of the season, man. I think he's just crushing it. He's crushing it. He's hilarious, and he's so earnest and honest, and what a lad.
So good on the content. Legendary, what's your thought on this? Like, what's your perspective? How are you viewing the two chains at the moment? Any particular leaning?
Yeah, I think it very much agree with the institutional flows of incremental buyers. I think one point is that what maybe matters more than if you look at Jupiter, if you look at Radium, then activity, which is very interesting data to look at for sure, and Brett is doing an amazing job on that. But I think that the narrative is in the words that we're using is more important than the actual data. Like very similarly how we talked about the words that Trump used for the Bitcoin strategic reserve, very similar to how we talked about that concept of relative highs or relative underpricement to the all-time high. And when we said Solana is 5x away and ETH is only 30% away, hence Solana must pump way more than ETH. And if enough people believe that and use that as the hypothesis or as the investment thesis to buy Solana, then obviously price is going to go up. And very similarly, if enough people believe that Jupiter is underpriced because activity is so good compared to the equivalent on ETH and have been buying the token, therefore the token will go up. So that data point on looking at the activity is very interesting, very relevant for sure. But equally important, in my opinion, is like the sentiment on X. And if this basically idea in this narrative is spreading more and more, that everyone's saying, yes, we need to look at activity. And if you look at that, then this is massively underpriced, then I could see more and more momentum form around that price action.
Nice. Interesting stuff. Look, I think it's a very, very interesting conversation to have. This is definitely not going away because the majority of Memecoin activity is going to take place on Solana. So we'll be continuously looking at that and reporting on it as we see it. Final quick question before we close out today on the topic more specifically of meme coins. How are you guys thinking about it? You might have seen the clip yesterday. Like I've kind of done a bit of not a 180 on it, but I made a realization in my head that I'm not appropriately allocated an amount of risk into that bucket of risk. Whether I'm going to be able to stay on top of it and manage it with all the other things I've got on, I don't know. But I need to up the attention in that direction. That was a personal decision I made. How are you guys thinking about it at all? We know that the attention and capital is flowing most through there at the moment, but what's your kind of general stance at the moment?
For me, I got like into this kind of as a full-time place to be through NFTs because I kind of understood them a little bit in the sense that I like really found myself wanting to own a CryptoPunk, I was like, that's something I really want. And clearly that sentiment, I wish I did not have because it's been a huge money loser for me. But I had that sentiment and I felt connection to it. I felt connection to the community. I really liked the history. I liked the story. I liked that they had been around for 6 years. I feel like a lot of the people in the space love the identity of being in crypto. And I thought NFTs were a great representation of that. That was a lot harder to do with just a bag of Bitcoin because I didn't think people were going to, use a Coinbase screenshot to like dunk on their economics professor who told them this would go to zero. But with NFTs, you do that. I struggle a bit more with meme coins but it's non-negotiable that there's been like a lot of money made in that space, but I still, and so I'm in no way like dismissive that there's something very, very real going on there, because the numbers are just too big. And the fact that Dogecoin, as the original meme coin, has stuck around for 7 years, at some point you have to say I'm missing something if you're calling a 7-year trend false or whatever. I mean, WIF and MOG, like these are like very real movements, and it's you can't deny them. But the other lesson I learned from NFTs is like, if you don't know something and have a view, you're probably exit liquidity. And I kind of feel like right now, if I were to get big into meme coins, it would take a long time for me to shake that feeling that and I'm not the type of guy who wants to go out and like find insider information or pump and dumps. That's just not really my person. It's not really what I want to do with my life right now. So sure. It's something I'm very interested in, like intellectually. I'm interested in like understanding this asset class better because the numbers are huge. But my personal strategy has broadly been to not participate right now all that aggressively, even though, obviously I work for Memeland. I think Memecoin, it is in some ways a meme coin, but it's also very much a real utility coin, and the utility side's the stuff that I enjoy a little bit more.
Nice. I think that's completely fair. Legendary, any variation to that?
Yeah, my variation to that would be I don't trade it on a day-to-day basis. I don't hunt it on Solana. What I do is the quote-unquote blue chip meme coin portfolio that I'm holding. I have my MOG, I have my PIP, and have been holding that for quite a while. On the one hand, I try to swing trade it a bit, not as successfully as I wished it went, but I'm then more comfortable to hold it. And then my other proxy for that stuff is actually Polymarket. So I'm like happy to take the occasional bet, as I did it with Popcat as the first.
Interesting.
Because it just fits. Like, it's just more befitting for my own attention span, because I can take a bet. Yes, I don't have an unlimited upside, but if I think I have a good bet there, I can just walk away, maybe close it early, or just know that once the bet is won, it's won, and I can't run into a situation that I buy a good meme coin that is relevant in the political cycle, but still end up losing money because I missed the opportunity to sell it before the attention shifted 34 minutes later into the next thing.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think you described different ways to slice the game, right? And maybe of course, you can be hunting at like 300K market cap, trying to find one that goes to 50 mil. Alternatively, you've got these, you mentioned blue chip memes. You've got these established ones that are already trading at huge multiples, and then you can just kind of trade that volatility. Alternatively, now you've got this Polymarket option, which is like bet that something's going to hit a bill. That's a pretty calm bet if you think that it is, or you think that it is, and you can place the bet, and there will be a time, there'll be a date at which that bet ends, and then you can be right or wrong.
Well, it's interesting because it's the trades that Legendary is talking about is that you have they're binary options. Like this is it's binary options, and I used to do options research, and there are times where different types of option strategies are better than like pure just pure spot bets, and there are times where spot bets have better kind of risk reward, and normally it is neither one nor the other, but it just depends on the nuance of your view. But I think that Legendary has pointed out that given all the manipulation that happens in Polymarket, like it's good to get the manipulators, be on the side of the manipulators, where if you have a binary, it's what he was saying about understanding the payouts. If you have one where it says, if this touches at any point, one person changes hands of this above $1 billion market cap, okay, well, like, let's get on the side of whoever's going to manipulate that. Like, that's the guy whose team I want to be on. And I think that's kind of an added source of alpha for this market if you find the right one.
Very, very interesting stuff. Guys, we have run over. That's been a great show. Thanks so much for joining. Everyone in the audience, thank you to our YouTube commenters as well, going crazy. Definitely enjoyed the dual appearance from the same screen with Legendary and Stats. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. What's on the agenda for today? What are you up to? Where are you going? Are you up to much today?
Well, this guy's leaving the Rocky Mountains, so he's going. I got 3 kids who all just started camping because he and I kicked it all day yesterday, and my wife was 100% parenting. I think today I got to do a little bit of that, but more importantly, I'm just so glad to be back home so I can really focus on my work in a much more meaningful way. Like that is, I've always been a nomad, and I like having that, but it's great to be back and to get to focus on what I enjoy here.
Thanks so much for joining us, man. It's great to have you with us. Legendary, on to the next location. You're going to be on again from the West Coast?
West Coast is going to be 4 a.m. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. I mean, I say that now, but just as I said that I'm not going to do the modern market during the vacation. So probably going to be on another time. Let's see.
Time zones are nothing coffee can't fix, Legendary. Come on.
See you at 4 a.m. See you at 4 a.m. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks, B.
Bye-bye.